Zaldrizes buzdaris gosdau.
George R. R. Martin and HBO are going to be busy for like the next decade. We got several shows that are coming down the pipeline, and one of them in particular has been for sure confirmed and greenlit for an entire first season. That one being Dunk and Egg. In this video, I want to discuss that along with a few other series that may be filling out the world of, well, A Song of Ice and Fire. Some of these series, if they're done correctly, have the potential to be far, far superior to anything we've gotten from HBO about George R. R. Martin's world. Like, better than Game of Thrones, better than House of the Dragon. Some of these stories just have that potential. Like I mentioned before, Dunk and Egg is kind of one of those. It's one of the only stories in Martin's world that Martin has written from one single POV, that being Dunk. The Lunk, right? Sir Duncan the Tall, who lived about 100 years or so before the events of the main Game of Thrones series. So a lot of the things that happened in that story directly influenced the main A Song of Ice and Fire series, the show, Game of Thrones, season 1 through 8. Before I jump into any of those other series that are coming, please do me a massive favor and slap a like on this video. Like goal is going to be 420. Get it? and then also, if you really enjoy my content, only if you enjoy it, please subscribe. It greatly helps me out here on YouTube, and also anybody that you're a fan of. Like, if you haven't pulled the trigger yet and haven't subscribed to them, but you watch their videos daily, go ahead and do that. It immensely helps out anybody like myself who's a creator here on YouTube. Thank you for watching. And one of the first things I do when I hear a new show is either in the works or has been sort of greenlit to film a pilot is look up potential castings. And I always go to, like I do this thing, for instance, for the Dunk and Egg show, I'll go to Google and I'll type in England's tallest actors under 30. And then you get a list of just English tall actors. But then in the back of my mind's like, no, this is wrong. They're not going to do this. They're going to pick some random tall actor who's probably got an insane stage presence, but has not made or, like been broken into Hollywood yet. Someone relatively unknown. It actually makes the most sense, right? This dude has got to have kind of like an open schedule for filming stuff, right? And also, any other actor who's insanely tall is pretty well known for other works. Like, for instance, we have, I thought this would be a good choice, but remember the guy who played Dick and Tarly in Game of Thrones Season 7? That actor in real life, his name is Tom Hopper, right? And he's actually, well over 6 foot, right? He's actually, to be exact, he's 6'5". Problem is he's 38. Dunk, debate me down below in the comment section, but Dunk could be as young as 16, right? So in the Dunk and Egg stories, when Dunk meets Lady Rohan Weber, she asks him his age, and he goes 20. And then, like, she asks him for clarification. He's like, and he thinks in his head, like, 20, it's an even number, sounds good. I could be 2 years younger or even older, but 20 is what he tells this woman, right? So you gotta realize Dunk has never really been one to celebrate his name days. He grew up as, an orphan boy in the streets of King's Landing. Like, he was so big and so tall that he would beat the crap out of all the other orphan kids and steal their stuff until Sir Erlen of Pennytree took him under his wing. So Dunk doesn't really know how old he is. He just knows that it's been quite some time since Sir Erlen of Pennytree has brought him into, his service and made him a squire. So getting back to what I was originally saying, no actor that pops up on Google fits both criteria, young enough and tall enough. You either got dudes that are 7 feet tall but 40, right? Or you got people that are closer in age to the character that could potentially portray them, but they're too short. And that's one thing you gotta realize, is that Dunk has to tower over everybody in all the scenes. It's almost as important, I guess it is really, in the Lord of the Rings movies. Remember, they didn't get little people to play the hobbits. They had regular size actors who were just short in real life, and it was all about camera angles and making sure whoever was playing humans or wizards or elves were, on a higher standing up platform so that they towered over the hobbits. That's important because hobbits are halflings, right? Well, Dunk being 7 feet tall and towering over everyone else is quintessential to his character. He's not smart, right? He wasn't trained well in being a man-at-arms. He wasn't trained by some castle man-at-arms who's charged with teaching all of the little lordlings how to fight. Like, that didn't happen. So one of the ways and the reasons why he survived so many fights and battles is his size. His size and his strength. So with that being said, you all let me know who you would cast for Sir Dunk down below in the comment section. I spent quite a good bit talking about the Dunk and Egg show, and I just want to mention a couple of theories before I move on to the next ones. But the main reason why I wanted to talk about that one first and foremost, and well, the longest in this video, is because that's the one that's been greenlit for an entire first season. All the other ones that I'm mentioning are kind of on the back burner, in the works, coming down the pipeline sort of thing. But Dunk and Egg will most likely be the very next Game of Thrones or TV show adaptation set under the Game of Thrones umbrella for HBO. So it's really exciting. So the first theory is just one that I got while rereading A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, right? So in book 2, we hear that from Dunk and Egg thinking back on what's happened in the year and a half or 2 years in between the first book and the second book, right, on his travels, we find out that something called the Spring Sickness has literally racked Westeros. And like technically in the last book, even though we had like the trial by 7, right? Basically Dunk beats up this dude Aegon, Bright Flame Targaryen, who's being a jerk to this puppeteer Tansel Too Tall. Dunk says he does it out of chivalry or whatever, right? So he stops Aegon from beating her. He says he does it out of chivalry, but really it's because he's got a crush on Tansel. And Tansel was putting on a puppet show that defamed the Targaryens. Like, she was basically having this show in which a puppet dragon was slain, right? And the dragon's head popped off and this puppet blood came out. And Aegon saw this and started beating her up. So Dunk, in the process of signing up for this tourney at Ashford, beats this guy up and gets thrown in jail. So they have this massive trial by 7 in which Maekar, who is Aegon Egg from Dunk and Egg's father, fights his brother Baelor Breakspear, who's the Prince of Dragonstone. Dunk's side wins, but Baelor is mortally wounded by Maekar, and like when he takes off his helmet, he dies. So what happens at the end of that? Since Baelor Breakspear dies, his son Prince Valar, or Valar rather, becomes the Prince of Dragonstone. So getting way back on track to what I was saying, Prince Valar dies during the Spring Sickness. So a new king rises to power, Aerys the First. Aerys the First, as in predecessor to the Mad King, King Aerys the Second. Yes, right. So Aerys First is kind of a good king, but like all Targaryens, they have negative traits and positive traits. The best thing about Aerys is that, yeah, he was into sorcery and all that stuff, but he read a lot. He was a big reader. Like, it was said that he would always take a book to bed, seldom take his wife, right? Like, he would always be reading. And I'm fascinated by characters that are like that, because I think it's pretty admirable. I try to be like that myself. But anyway, this dude, Aerys King Aerys the Second, King Aerys the First, King Aerys the Second's namesake, is in power when the second, Hedge Knight, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms series takes place. I have trouble differentiating between the first, second, and third stories because they're all a part of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, and that's how I read them. So even though they're separated into 3 books in A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, I can never remember what their titles are. But in talking and stalling, I've now remembered them. First one is the Hedge Knight, second one is the Sworn Sword, and the third one is the Mystery Knight. So in the Sworn Sword, this dude, King Aerys the First, the book reader, right? He's in power, and his hand is this fella known as Bloodraven. And you're like, oh, I know who Bloodraven is. That's the guy who's in the tree who taught Breanne how to be the tree guy. Right. But in the books, he's way better of a character. More well-rounded, more fleshed out, has way more mystery to him. Just as a side note, not the theory that I want to mention, but it's really cool that he's actually looked the same this whole time. Like, Breanne sees him in the tree, and he's like, oh my god, it's a corpse with vines going through him. But then Sir Dunk sees him a few years before the events of the first Hedge Knight book. Dunk sees Bloodraven riding through the streets, and he's like, holy crap, this dude looks awesome, but he's a corpse. He's a corpse. He says he's got corpse-like features, bone white, like he resembles a corpse. So it's kind of interesting that when he was still alive in King's Landing, Sir Dunk sees him and describes him in a similar way that Breanne the Broken describes him. Although he's obviously more worse for wear in the main series, it's just cool that he's kind of always looked like a zombie, right? So what I'm getting at here is when the Spring Sickness happens, right, a bunch of individuals are wiped out. And what ends up happening is Bloodraven commands all of these bodies to be put into the dragon pit and burned. It's mentioned that the flames get so bright and so colorful and it's so lit up that it looks like dragons are in Westeros, in King's Landing, in the dragon pit in particular, again, right? So that made me think, this is a really weak theory, right? What if Bloodraven caused the spring sickness, right? Okay, let me backtrack. What if Bloodraven saw the spring sickness as a way to sacrifice people to try to bring back dragons, right? So Bloodraven is ensorcelled in magic. He potentially has face manipulating abilities, which means he's probably trained as a faceless man. He's well-read. It's always mentioned how he's ensorcelling people, and a lot of people think that Ares the First being obsessed with magic and promoting Bloodraven to his hand, the two of them are working together on, trying to bring back dragons. So what if Bloodraven either lets the spring sickness happen or uses it to his advantage, and this is what he tries to do in the dragon pit when he lights those bodies on fire, and the flames are said to make it look as though dragons are in the dragon pit again. So that was one of them. Really weak, I know. Tear me apart down below in the comments section. Another thing that I want to mention is Dunk doesn't know who his father is. And I've already done the math. His father, I thought, could be Bloodraven, but Bloodraven being born in like 174, 175 AC doesn't quite work out because Dunk is too old. Although it's possible, because like I said, Dunk doesn't know his age. And if he's really like 15 or 16 and not actually 20, then it does work out. Bloodraven could totally be his dad. But anyway, Bloodraven ends up becoming too treacherous. And when Egg from the Dunk and Egg stories becomes king, he ends up sending Bloodraven to the wall because Bloodraven basically went against the king's word, right? So Daemon Blackfyre, who caused the first Blackfyre rebellion by rebelling against his brother Daeron the Good and saying, look, our father, King Aegon, really wanted me to be the king. Look, I've got this sword, Blackfyre. So anyway, he's killed, right? But then he's got a son, right? Aenys Blackfyre wants to participate in a great council that's called to select the next king of Westeros, right? So Bloodraven's like, all right, dude, that's cool. Come on over here from Tyrosh, right? Come into King's Landing. We got you. Safe conduct. You're under the protection of the king. Well, he gets to King's Landing, and then Bloodraven has him brought into the Red Keep, and then Bloodraven beheads him. So because of this, when Egg, the Unlikely, who's so far down the line of succession, they call him Egg the Unlikely, right? He's allowed to marry for love because it's thought that he's never going to sit the Iron Throne. He ends up getting selected. He sits the Iron Throne, and one of the first things he does is banish Bloodraven north of the wall, right? So at this time, Dunk is still alive and with him, and Dunk is promoted to eventually the Kingsguard, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, and he travels with Bloodraven to the wall, right? And I always thought that was kind of interesting, and I never really put it together until I was reading The Sworn Shield. That is literally, in my opinion, Dunk mentions how his father was probably a pickpocket in King's Landing, and he may have been sent to the wall. His mother was likely a whore, and he doesn't know who she was, but maybe she died because Dunk was so large during childbirth. That's actually probably pretty plausible because Dunk is such a big dude, right? But he thinks that maybe instead of his father being executed, he was sent to the wall. So Dunk has traveled to the wall. We don't know, or he's traveled north before. We don't know if he's gone all the way to the wall aside from when he escorts Bloodraven north to the wall, right? And I think my whole point in this whole thing was that he wanted to do this because he knew that there's a chance that his father could be at the wall. Like I said before, we don't know, or I don't know personally, fans, we don't know if he's actually looked for his father before at the wall. I just thought that was kind of interesting to include. And remember, there's only been 3 Dunk and Egg stories so far, so George plans on putting out at least 2 more before this adaptation concludes. I think that pretty much wraps up most of my thoughts for this video on the Dunk and Egg series. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. The next one I want to talk about is obviously the Jon Snow series. In my opinion, technically Game of Thrones outpaced the books, and Jon's story, if they were to do a show, would be completely uncharted territories, and let's face it, that's kind of scary. The most successful adaptations, in my opinion, have solid source material, and Dan and Dave kind of cut too much out of Jon Snow's story arc to continue that without having to backtrack and retcon a few things. So it is scary in that sense that it doesn't necessarily have source material, but then you gotta realize that the books are so massive they can adapt other parts of the story for the Jon Snow series. I feel like it makes the most sense when you rewatch Game of Thrones, right? It makes the most sense to continue Jon Snow's storyline in the North and realize that Daenerys isn't dead. Like, Daenerys she isn't dead. Jon Snow was brought back to life. Beric Dondarrion, right? Brought back to life several times. He's not special. He's not as special as Daenerys or Jon Snow, right? So, 100% Thoros of Myr got his powers from the place that Drogon is flying Daenerys' body. So the Snow series would be about Jon Snow having to finish what he started, so to speak, or maybe potentially dying with Daenerys, and like, you know, the last couple of Targaryens get wiped out in a Dance of Dragons 2.0. Maybe Jon claims a dragon somehow. I don't know. Let me know what you all think, what they could do with the Jon Snow show down below in the comment section. I know I just mentioned how excited I was for Dunk and Egg, but I also am a massive fan of the original series that made me love this world so much, so I want to see my favorite characters to ever have exist on screen again, Daenerys and Jon Snow. Then next up, Doom of Valyria. My opinion, makes the most sense, right? You have Doom running alongside Doom of Valyria, running alongside the Dunk and Egg series. House of the Dragon, after season 2 concludes, is going to be halfway through the series. So by the time we get the Dunk and Egg show out, it'll maybe be working on around the same time we get the 3rd season of House of the Dragon. And then, by the time we get season 2 of Dunk and Egg, House of the Dragon is going to be off. The story's going to be completely told. So you have one story that focuses on the Targaryens with no dragons, then you'll have another show like the Doom where everybody has a dragon, because it's the Doom of Valyria, right? Like, it would be really cool to see Valyria in its height. It doesn't even have to be a massive season because there's not enough source material for that. Or, a massive show running for multiple seasons because there's not enough source material for that. Instead, you could do a solid 1 or 2 seasons about some of the families in the Valyrian Freehold and how they caused the downfall. Because one of the things that we're told in World of Ice and Fire and in Fire and Blood, and even in the House of the Dragon show, is the Valyrian mages were the closest to the active flames and the 14 flames and the ring of volcanoes that surrounded the Valyrian Peninsula, right? Those mages were tasked with doing rituals, which probably meant blood sacrifices, to keep the fires at bay from consuming and engulfing all of Valyria. The same magic that allowed Valyria to expand, control dragons, and do everything they did is the same one that destroyed them. They had practices and religious ceremonies that they had to fulfill in order to keep that magic at bay and from consuming them. That failed because the Valyrian dragon-riding families assassinated too many of the mages from other Valyrian families and thus brought about their own downfall. So literally, you know how the Targaryen Civil War, Dance of the Dragons, wiped out all the Targaryens' dragons, and then the Blackfire Rebellion wiped out a good chunk of Targaryens, and then Targaryens in general just killed themselves a lot, right? That's kind of what happened in Valyria. So the Valyrians have a long history of internal feuding and fighting and causing about their own downfall. I really think the Valyrian, a Doom of Valyria show would be awesome to watch on screen. And then the last potential series I want to talk about for this video, Aegon's Conquest / Maegor's Bride. Remember, we got news of that right before they confirmed Dunk and Egg would be greenlit for an entire 1st season. We got news of Aegon's Conquest being a movie that tied into a TV show. Super excited about that, right? So that could kind of relate to the Doom of Valyria. You can sort of have a time jump in between a movie that showed the Doom of Valyria, and then you show the first Targaryen that, really made an impact on the world, Aegon the Conqueror, right? You skip, the couple hundred years or so of Aenar the Exile's family being on Dragonstone before they decided to turn west, to go to Westeros, to conquer Westeros, right? The movie could be about Aegon, maybe visiting the ruins of Valyria, or just like it sets up around that, right? And then you start off the movie by having Aegon and his wars fighting over in Essos, and then you could start the conquest in the movie, but then, show the most insane parts, and then the TV show is about his sons, Aenys and Maegor. Really Maegor, because Maegor has the craziest story. I feel like it would be, like I said, sort of quintessential to have a show where the Targaryens or Valyrians are riding dragons, and then a show that's just like about interpersonal conflicts and people, right? No dragons. Showing like the two of those together on running at the same time, not on the, it makes the most sense in my opinion. Let me know what you all think down below in the comment section. I'm gonna get the heck out of here. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video. Like was gonna be 420. Then also make sure you subscribe. That's like the best thing you can do for my channel here on YouTube. Super special shout out to the Northwestern member Breanne Johnson, Tyler Schnabel, and Destiny Mix Queen Phillips 420, as they are off executive producers of this video over on my platform where I release exclusive content. It's called Patreon. It's patreon.com/AnaaaRodarte. Check it out if you want a little bit extra. But like I said, thank you to those members. Along that, and thank you for watching.